Okay, so let's unpack this. Today we're diving into something, well, pretty monumental. Happened recently, really shifted the global security landscape.
Hmm.
An operation that was uh, kept under wraps, very secret until just now. We're talking about Operation Midnight Hammer,
Right.
the big US B-2 bomber strike on Iran's nuclear facilities.
Mm.
And our mission here really is to try and untangle all the reports we're seeing.
Yeah, there's a lot out there.
Exactly. From the official claims, to intelligence whispers, international reactions, we want to give you a comprehensive, balanced view of what we think happened, why it's such a big deal, and what we actually know for sure.
And what's really fascinating, I think, is how quickly this whole thing became this focal point for completely different stories,
Right.
wildly conflicting narratives.
Right, immediately.
From the second it was announced, basically, the different versions flying around, it really highlights the challenge, doesn't it? Trying to understand these high-stakes global events.
For sure.
And why you absolutely have to look past those first headlines to, get the full picture.
Absolutely. And that's exactly why we need to start with the core facts, just lay out what we understand about Operation Midnight Hammer.
Okay.
So this went down June 22nd, 2025. The key players: 7 US B-2 Spirit stealth bombers.
7 of them. That's significant in itself.
It is, and they flew nonstop from White Man Air Force Base in Missouri. Just think about that distance.
Yep, incredible.
An 18 to 25-hour round-trip mission. Sources are saying it's the longest B-2 operation of its kind since, 2001?
That's the reporting, yeah. Speaks volumes about endurance, both human and machine.
Totally. And their main targets: 3 key Iranian nuclear sites: Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan.
The big ones.
The big ones. And crucially, this wasn't just the B-2s flying solo. It was this huge coordinated effort.
Right, it had to be.
Multiple mid-air refuelings. You had F-22s and F-35s providing fighter support, tankers, vital surveillance aircraft, and even Tomahawk missiles launched from submarines.
Yeah, if you just step back and look at that, the sheer scale, the coordination involved, it points to, deep strategic planning. Really deep. This wasn't some, spur-of-the-moment decision. This suggests years of preparation, intelligence gathering, logistical work. It's a massive undertaking.
It really is. The logistics alone are kind of mind-boggling. So, okay, how did they actually do it? Pull off something so complex, so secretively?
Well, that's where the stealth aspect is key.
Right, the invisibility. The operation apparently relied heavily on strict radio silence and flying low, really hugging the terrain to avoid radar.
Standard stealth tactics, but executed perfectly by the sounds of it.
And here's where it gets really interesting. There was this deception element, too. Reports say decoy bombers were sent off towards Guam.
Ah, misdirection. Classic.
Yeah, deliberately drawing eyes away from the real mission path. And the firepower they brought. We're talking about 14 GBU-57 bombs.
The MLPs. Massive ordnance penetrators.
Exactly. These things are huge. 30,000-pound bunker busters. 12 of them apparently hit Fordow, the deeply buried site.
Which makes sense. You need that kind of power for Fordow.
Right. And 2 hit Natanz. Meanwhile, the subs were launching Tomahawks at the Isfahan facility.
So a multi-pronged attack hitting different sites with different weapons tailored to the target.
Precisely.
And what's really remarkable, maybe even unprecedented in some ways, is that these bombers got into Iranian airspace, delivered their payloads, and got out. Completely undetected.
Undetected. No shots fired in response.
According to the reports, none. Which isn't just about the stealth of the B-2s, though obviously that's huge. It's also attributed to, superior strategy and planning, but also potentially degraded Iranian air defense capabilities. Intel suggests maybe they weren't as ready as they could have been.
Interesting.
And as you mentioned, this was the first time the GBU-57 MOP was actually used in combat. And it's the deepest strategic use of B-2s we've seen so far. The real takeaway maybe isn't just that stealth works, but that even now, with satellites everywhere, pervasive surveillance, a well-planned, sophisticated operation can still achieve near total surprise. It kind of challenges what we think is possible in terms of detection.
Okay, so if the operation went that smoothly, that undetected, it makes sense that the initial U.S. government statements were pretty strong.
I'm confident, yeah.
General Dan Kane, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, they called it the largest B-2 operational strike in U.S. history. And they claimed extremely severe damage to all 3 sites: Fordow, Natanz, Isfahan.
Right. And then President Trump took it even further.
Yeah, his statement was that the facilities were completely and totally obliterated.
Obliterated. Very strong language.
Very definitive.
So, okay, That's the official U.S. line. Very successful, maximum damage. But then the intelligence picture starts to get, well, a bit murky.
Right. This is where the different narratives really kick in.
Exactly. The key question becomes, how do those really confident claims square with what some of the intelligence agencies were saying, even preliminarily?
So what were they saying?
Well, initial reports, supposedly from the DIA, that's the Defense Intelligence Agency, suggested that the strike might have only delayed Iran's nuclear progress by maybe a few months.
Months, not obliterated.
Not obliterated, no. A setback, yes, but maybe not a decisive one.
Yeah.
But then you have reports that the CIA's assessment was different.
More optimistic?
Seemingly, yes. Their assessment reportedly indicated a much more significant impact, setting Iran back years.
Okay, so even within the U.S. intelligence community, there wasn't immediate agreement.
Doesn't seem like it. Years versus months.
Right.
That's a pretty big gap in assessment. And then, of course, you have Iran's reaction.
Right. What did they say?
They call the damage superficial, downplayed it significantly, and, importantly, they vowed retaliation, including a specific threat to close the Strait of Hormuz.
Which is always a serious threat, given how much oil flows through there.
Absolutely. So what you're seeing unfold is this battle over the narrative. Who achieved what? What was the real impact? That becomes almost as important as the strike itself in shaping how the world sees it and what happens next diplomatically.
It's a really complex puzzle of information, isn't it? You've got these bold claims of success from the top U.S. officials. Then you have the intelligence agencies giving more nuanced, maybe even conflicting reads on the situation.
Right.
And then Iran is pushing back hard, minimizing the damage while making these pretty serious threats. It's crucial for us and for you listening to just lay out all these pieces as they're reported. We're not endorsing one view here.
No, just presenting the different accounts.
Exactly. So I guess the big question is, how do we make sense of these wildly different stories? And what does all this mean for, stability?
Well, the fallout is undeniably significant. First off, Iran's threats of retaliation closing Hormuz, other actions that immediately spikes the escalation risk.
Big time.
Yeah.
Huge regional security concerns, global ones too. And that intelligence puzzle we talked about, the DIA versus CIA assessment, that creates real uncertainty.
About how effective the strike actually was.
Precisely. And that uncertainty makes it really hard to plan next steps, right?
Yeah.
How does the international community react when the true impact is unclear?
Yeah.
And looking bigger picture, this is clearly a major military action. It marks a serious escalation in that whole tense dynamic between Iran, Israel, and the U.S.
For sure.
The diplomatic repercussions are just starting to play out. Things like this, they don't just happen in isolation. They send ripples everywhere. Markets, alliances, regional stability, the whole 9 yards.
Okay, so let's try and bring this all together. What we've unpacked today about Operation Midnight Hammer. It was this massive, highly secret US B-2 strike.
June 22nd, 2025.
Right. Targeting Iran's Fordo, Natanz, Isfahan nuclear sites. They used these incredibly powerful bunker busters, the GBU-57s, plus Tomahawks.
A very complex, stealthy operation.
Very. And while the U.S. initially claimed, overwhelming success, severe damage, even obliteration, the reality check came pretty quickly from different intelligence sources and obviously from Iran itself. It paints a much more complicated picture.
Yeah, some reports suggesting maybe just a temporary delay for Iran's program.
While Iran calls the damage superficial, so we're left with these really conflicting assessments about how bad the damage actually was. Makes it tough to know the true impact.
Absolutely. Which leads to maybe the final thought for you listening.
Yeah.
The really important question here might be, what are the long-term strategic consequences when you have a major military strike like this? Very public in its announcement, but with such an uncertain outcome.
All right, what does that do?
How do nations navigate that ambiguity? How do they plan? How do they react when there's no clear consensus on what actually happened on the ground? Understanding these conflicting narratives, how they're shaped and why they differ, it's not just about knowing the facts of this one event. It's really key to being truly informed about the messy, complex world we live in and realizing how sometimes perception can be just as powerful as reality.